Our second presenter today is Sandy Levinson, who's from the University of Texas Law School, where he holds the W. St. John Garwood and W. St. John Garwood Jr. Centennial Chair in Law. He has visited at Harvard, Yale, New York University, and Boston University law schools, as well as the law faculties at, well, lots of other universities in Europe here. To cut to the chase, he is the author of Constitutional Faith, which won the Scribes Award, and his paper for us today is Autobiographical Notes of a Jewish Law Professor.
Which is not a paper, I should say. I too want to express my gratitude to Mark and Suzanne. And when Suzanne asked me, I did explain that in many ways I think I've said almost all that I have to say about the central topic in two pieces that in fact were published in the Cardozo Law Review some years ago. One of them identifying the Jewish lawyer, reflections on the professional identity, and a second book review of Bo Burt's book on Justices Frankfurter and Brandeis, in which his book is Two Jewish Justices. My review is Who is a Jew, and in parentheses, is justice. What ties both of those pieces together and what ties my remarks together today, including the autobiographical musings, is the continued perplexity about notions of Jewish identity and the inevitably ideological issues that are raised by that. It occurred to me that if I did want to write a paper and update some earlier work, perhaps I could have written about the two Jewish justices now on the Supreme Court, that is Steve Breyer and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but quite frankly, I can't imagine that there would be much that would be interesting to say. You look at both Brandeis and Frankfurter, to whatever degree either would be defined as a Jewish justice in some sense. Felix Frankfurter notably left the synagogue, I think when he was 16 or so, never to return, though he did ask famously, I think it was Max Friedman to say, Lou Henkin to say Kaddish for him. But still, there'd be no difficulty in viewing Frankfurter as a richly Jewish justice in a number of ways. Certainly for better and for worse. Among his most famous single utterances is the first paragraph of Barnett, when he evokes his Jewishness in order then to take on not a universalistic notion, but a notion of American identity trumping any sort of parochial identity. Brandeis's affiliation with Zionism is well known. You look at Breyer and Ginsburg, and frankly, I would be perplexed to figure out anything interesting to say about either of them in being richly Jewish, though it's interesting that the current court, as somebody who is a court watcher on occasion, it's interesting that the current court has no, I think it's fair to say, mainstream Protestants on it. It has 5 Catholics, 2 secular Jews, and 2 basically secular Protestants. But the great American Protestant religions of my youth are nowhere represented on the Supreme Court, and I think that is a very, very interesting statement about American political sociology. But I say I don't know exactly what you would discover about Judaism if you did any close analysis of Breyer and Ginsburg, and say I'm not interested in doing that. The point of the Identifying the Jewish Lawyer paper, I refer to it as my Sandy Koufax paper, because it begins with an evocation of the greatest Jewish ball player in history, that is Sandy Koufax, and what gave him, or it gives him this title, is that he refused to pitch the opening game of the World Series on Yom Kippur. and every Jewish kid of a certain age, and I gather maybe even unto the next and even the next generation after that, knows of the great Koufax and his embrace of his Jewish identity over his Dodger identity when it really counted. But the thrust of this piece, it goes on to ask the question of would there be any interesting sense, or indeed non-offensive sense, in which you would say, well, what really made Sandy Koufax great is that he pitched like a Jew. And I assume the answer is no. That I assume what got him into the Hall of Fame is that he mastered certain mechanics of pitching that had literally nothing whatsoever to do with his being Jewish. And so, I offer a variety of ways of getting at the notion of identifying somebody as a Jewish lawyer. One way is simply being born of Jewish parents, and another way would be being minimally observant, as Koufax was. Another way, and this was part of what was very interesting about last night, lawyers like Mark Stern, or like Nat Lewin, who not only are quite literally visibly Jewish with regard to wearing the kippah, but also have devoted their lives to focusing on issues of particular interest to something describable as the Jewish community. And then there would be Jewish lawyers who would master Jewish law, Dayanim, and the like, who would not be found in American law at all, particularly because it has nothing to do with their identity as deeply Jewish lawyers. So I presented this kind of framework. I still think it's useful, frankly, but I've already written it down, and I don't have anything much to elaborate on it. So borrowing the dictum from fiction that, one is best advised to write about what one knows, and what does one know better than oneself? I told Suzanne that I would be interested in offering certain sorts of autobiographical reflections. I suppose, being of a certain age, having spent now 35 years or so in the area of American constitutional law, having written various things, including editing a case book and other stuff, in what sense would what I have done reflect the fact that I'm certainly Jewish, but it may have only a biographical relationship, but no deep relationship to the fact that, yes, I am Jewish. I cancel classes on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, first day of Rosh Hashanah, since I confess, myself observe the second day, though several years ago when I visited the Harvard Law School, I did cancel the second day because I assumed, frankly, that many more of the students at Harvard would be second day observers than is true at the University of Texas Law School. And I do think that one of the reasons to cancel classes, even if one isn't observant oneself, is to make it easier for people who are religiously observant to be observant. But of course, that principle doesn't, I think it would be illegitimate to say, I want to make it easier for Jews to be observant, but I really don't care about Muslim holidays or other holidays. Christians usually don't have to worry about this problem because, of course, we have a Christian calendar. And I have to say, one of the things I enjoyed the year or the semester I taught at Hebrew University in Jerusalem is working under a Jewish calendar, so that
everything started late.
Everything started late, and I literally forgot that Christmas was occurring because it just was so completely not part of the consciousness, and other days were taken off. But in any event, I thought I would go through a number of episodes in which Jewishness may play a role, and then I'll leave it up to you as to whether it has anything interestingly causative to say, or whether this is nothing more than a random set of the kind of autobiographical observations that any of us could give, but it doesn't add up to anything by way of saying, well, yes, this is what makes my take distinctively Jewish. Indeed, what I'd want to argue is that the whole notion of distinctively Jewish take is probably a grievous mistake that I think we are much too variegated a community for that term to really to have much purchase.